Welcome to today's session, everyone.
We are Pre-Med CC, a student-led organization established in the fall of 2021.
Our goal as an organization was to create an online program for pre-medical students at community colleges and universities, with the hope of guiding the next generation of diverse and inclusive physicians.
And while we advertise our organization as being for community college students, our events are open to anyone.
We realize that finding guidance and mentorship in a pre-med journey can be especially challenging for first-generation pre-med students,
people that lack the financial resources, or just those who do not know people in the medical field.
One of the best parts about our events is that they are virtual, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home.
We typically have events on Fridays from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and on Saturdays from 11 a.m. to 12:30 Pacific Standard Time.
If you aren't able to attend the event, all of our sessions are uploaded on our YouTube channel.
Many of our sessions will end up with a Q&A with the speakers.
Any questions that you have, you may put it in the Q&A session on Zoom, and our team members will read them and have them answer.
After you have attended our event, you can log into our website and complete the quiz, which will contain questions pertaining to our session today.
If you score 70% or higher on the quiz, you will be awarded a certificate to show that you attended our session today.
If you want to stay connected with the upcoming events or just want to tell your pre-med friends about the Pre-Med CC, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok as @PreMedCC.
All right, welcome everyone to today's session. I will just have a quick introduction for our two speakers today. All right, Mario Raul Navarro Jr. is a graduate physician assistant in the program at the Betty Irene Moore School of Nursing at UC Davis. He completed his undergraduate degree in psychobiology at UCLA in 2018. Sorry, he is a first-generation Mexican-American and the son of immigrants from the state of Sinaloa and Jalisco. He is passionate about helping underrepresented minority students interested in pursuing the PA profession and look forward to answering all of your questions. Omar Manuel Nunez is a first-generation Mexican-American born and raised in the San Fernando Valley. He received his bachelor's degree from California State University, Northridge, where he also became a published organic chemist. He is currently a third-year PA student at Stanford University. His clinical background comes from emergency medicine, as he was an EMT for over 2 years. He is an NHSC scholar, so he intends to work in the primary care setting, but he also loves the idea of working in the ED. His experiences as a son of an immigrant family drive him to diversify medicine and uplift underserved communities, inside and outside of medicine. Lifestyle medicine is an area of interest that he plans on advancing in his practice as a future PA. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Hoping everyone's doing well. Thank you for the beautiful introduction once again. So me and Mario have a presentation ready for y'all, and it has to do with the PA application and how to maximize and enhance your application. So we're gonna get that started in a bit.
All right. And then again, we're going to try to move quickly through these slides. That way we have enough time for questions. I know the last session, we kind of took a little long to get through all the slides. And so we'll try to move quickly. And then again, you can submit your questions and we'll hopefully get to them. And so let's just make sure people can see my desktop. All right. Can you guys see my screen? All right, I'm getting a thumbs up. Omar, all good? All right. So like Omar said, the purpose of this session is to really focus on mastering the PA school application. And so one of the ways we decided to format this talk is to really just give you guys an overview of what the pre-PA timeline looks like, assuming that you're applying in this upcoming year. All right. Then we had a little poll just come up, so I'll let you guys answer that, but we'll get right into it. All right. So, how long is the process? So this is a question that we often get from students, and you would think, like any application for really anything in life, that it would be just relatively quick, that you can just submit some documents, kind of like you're going to the DMV to get your car registered. And then in a month, you find out if you've been accepted. Unfortunately, the PA school application process, similar to med schools and dental programs, or really anything in academia, is kind of a long process. And so in the entire process from graduating high school to becoming a PA can take anywhere from 6 to 8 years. Typically, your bachelor's degree, without taking any like breaks or leaves of absences, will run you 4 years, and then PA school is typically around 27 months or two years and some change. And then one of the things that we want to highlight, the reason I have up here 6 to 8 years, is because sometimes, and very common, especially for PA students, we have something, as everyone has probably heard of, a gap year, which is a misnomer. And Omar and I always talk about this. You should not call it a gap year, because that implies that there's a gap in something or a deficiency in something, when really it's a growth year. This is a year where you're taking time to grow as a student, grow as an employee. Maybe this is a year where you're working as a medical assistant, as a CNA or an EMT. So really you're growing as a future provider. And so that could take anywhere from 1 to 2 years. One thing to highlight here, during my gap year, like I mentioned, I worked as an EMT full-time during this time, and then ended up working as an ER technician as well. So really what I was doing during this growth year was get my patient care hours. Omar, what was your experience during this growth year?
Yeah, so in my growth year, so I definitely did work full-time as an EMT, about 1.5 years or so. And, not only was I doing that, I was catching up on, things in life at the same time, trying to pay bills at the same time, taking classes that I was missing. So I was missing anatomy and physio, and I took extra classes like medical terminology. So as I was like building up my resume, at the same time, honestly, I was at the same time enjoying life. And I think that's something that's pretty important as well, especially for my personal long endurance. But also speaking about the process, I mean, don't feel bad or beat yourself up if you're not within the 6 to 8 years. Like, for example, I graduated. It took me 5 years to graduate with my bachelor's, and some people take more than 2 years, more than 1 to 2 years for gap years or growth years. Some people make career changes. So this is like a good framework, but like I said, don't beat yourself up if you're not even near this time frame.
Definitely, because there's also this time it's going to look different if this is your second career, which is common in the PA profession. We often have people who are, mechanics or worked in as like chefs and things like that. So it really varies. This is just what it would look like if you went straight through the academic side of things without taking any breaks. But like Omar said, that was a really good point. It's unique to every individual, and no one journey looks the same, and one is not better than the other. So, all right, next slide. Go ahead, Omar. I'll let you take this one.
Yeah. So Mario helped me compose these main ingredients here for the 5-star course meal, and a prerequisite course essentially. It's taking the coursework that will make you highly competitive and excel academically. So, first of all, do the prerequisites you need for PA school. And if you're generally interested in other courses, you might as well, but it wouldn't hurt to actually pursue that as well. And, it can help you with understanding like other classes in general. Like if you take a hematology class, and even though it's not required, it might help you along the way. And if you enjoy it and you genuinely love it, it can definitely shine in your application. For the letters of recommendation, so these are honestly pretty important. Grades are important. I think we all have heard GPA is very important. But this is where you shine, have the possibility to shine. Like your persona can come out through these letter of recommendations from people. So at least 3 glowing, and we want to highlight glowing letter of recs that showcase your strengths. Obviously you can have 5 letter of recs, but I think something that we are trying to emphasize is that, it's a quality over quantity. You do want to ask, at least 3 people that you think that can write you a glowing letter of recommendation. And if there's 4 or 5, the more the merrier. But I would say, for example, I only had 4 and glowing letter of regs, but the max is 5, I believe, still. So I could have filled in a 5th one, but I thought it wasn't entirely necessary. So what about yourself, Mario?
I had 5 letters of recommendation, but kind of similar to you. I had one from an MD, a doc, one from a PA, one from a science professor, one from a pastor from one of the churches that I had volunteered at, and then one from my EMT work supervisor. And so yeah, like if it wasn't for the pastor letter of rec, I would have had 4. But I was applying to some institutions that had some Christian affiliations, and so I was like, maybe that'll help. Didn't land an interview for those programs, but it is what it is.
And similar to Mario, I had one from a professor, which was also my PI, a supervisor from my EMT job, a paramedic. Third was a professor or teacher that I would TA for a lot. And then the last one was a PA. Yes. And then, so for patient care experience, so this is where it can get tricky for a lot of us, right? So on the basis, every school is essentially gonna accept, an EMT, a CNA, and any higher level of care, such as like RNs, paramedics. But the way to, I guess, have a good picture of if your patient care experience is enough is to really think if you actually are providing not only a service, but providing patient care to the general population that you're treating. So EMTs, CNAs, you're actually handling, patients, you're transferring them to beds, and EMTs, you're, managing their treatment on the way to, the hospital. And then we have also phlebotomy. Phlebotomy, you are having patient care, you are, extracting their blood and maybe like giving vaccines and whatnot. And however, I will say there were some programs that didn't necessarily completely accept phlebotomy, but it varies. So there's medical assistance. So either front office versus back office. Back office, you're taking blood pressures. You're asking the patient multiple questions, getting a history of the patient. Front office is a little bit more tricky because you probably aren't providing medical care, so that might not be like an adequate classification of patient care experience. You could add it to healthcare experience, but probably not patient care experience. Are there any other ones, Mario?
No, I think just the big thing with the patient care experience is just really being involved in the care, and like even if it's a simple thing, like last session I highlighted the fact that as an EMT, when you're in the back of that ambulance and you have your patient connected to like, a pulse oximeter, an oxygen level monitor, and you can make that decision. Oh, dang, they dropped below 90%. Let me start them on 2 liters via nasal cannula. Like you get to make that medical decision making of saying, this patient needs oxygen. I'm going to take that information and start a treatment, which that is a simple, but still like a huge example of the type of patient care experiences that like PA schools like to see, essentially where you're involved in some form of the medical decision process. And then did you talk about the final pillar, the personal statement?
The personal statements.
The only thing that I would add on the EMT experience is a lot of you that go to EMT schools, you could do it at any JC. But
save money.
And there's also a lot of them are free. So like there's some of them that cost a lot of money, which I mean, unless you really want to pay for it, but most of them, like most of the community colleges, you could actually take the course for free. They have like a community grant or whatever. But the other thing is that most of you that get jobs at EMT, I know that it's more exciting to go do 911. But the problem is that as an EMT on a 911 call, you're driving the ambulance. You're not doing patient care. So the best EMT job that you could get, and you could write a lot about, but also put in your resume that you've done inter-facility transport. So basically 2 EMTs that take patients from one ER to another. because you're responsible as an EMT, you're responsible for that patient in the back of that ambulance, or being on critical care transport with a nurse. And that involves a lot more than just driving the van. And so just kind of put that out there, is that, as you know, it's great to go 911. But again, you show up to an accident, you have 12 firefighters and paramedics, and you're kind of like the low man on the low person on the totem pole, and then
Yeah.
you end up driving the van, the ambulance, and you don't really get any clinical, experience. And but like inter-facility transport, I never worked as an EMT in the field. I only worked inside the hospital, but just talking to a lot of EMTs, and I was being recruited to work for critical care transport, like per diem. And I was like, if I want more work, I'll just work OT. But yeah, and you guys work the field, so you guys could probably
Yeah, and I
attest
will
to
say,
that,
I mean,
Omar.
as an EMT, you really like, if you get that license, you like Juven mentioned, there's a lot of opportunities. Like I know he highlighted working like ALS, Advanced Life Support, which is working alongside a paramedic doing 911 calls, interfacility transports or BLS units. Those are the ones where you kind of have more of that hands-on. He mentioned critical care. You can also work in ER position, but the main takeaway is EMT is not the only, I guess, patient care experience that is out there. There's a lot of different and great opportunities available, like medical assistant, CNA, phlebotomist, and medical scribe. The big thing we'll say about kind of those like phlebotomy and medical scribe, where there's a lot of questions surrounding and whether schools will accept that. Check in with the programs that you are planning on applying to. They usually will have a list of the jobs that they accept. And so again, and you'll hear this throughout this session and future sessions. Like always, for the programs that you're thinking of applying to, do your research, go on their websites and really hash out what are their requirements, what are the hours, what is the minimum GPA, what is the jobs that they like to see in their students. And then we'll talk in a little bit about personal statement and how to essentially write a great one. But the big thing with this slide is that these are the 4 pillars of your application. And then the other ingredients, well, I've titled these the seasoning, is the other components that make up a PA school application. And so this is like your healthcare hours, your non-healthcare hours, extracurriculars, volunteer experiences in leadership, research, shadowing, teaching. These are all great things to have, and they're going to make your application much stronger. But really, at the end of the day, these are, again, the pillars of your application. These are the seasoning, okay? And so like, there's students out there who have gotten into PA programs. A lot of students, most PA students, get in without research. Some students get in without shadowing. Some, I didn't have any teaching experience. Some get in with minimum, volunteer work. And so it's just something to keep in mind. And like Omar mentioned, quality over quantity. So don't feel like you need to do, a student that shows up with an application, they have 5 healthcare hours, 5 non-healthcare hours, 5 hours of extracurriculars, and 5 of everything is not impressive versus someone who has, hundreds of hours working in a certain job, hundreds of hours in volunteer. That is going to be much more impressive and kind of show the admissions committee like, dang, this person is really dedicated and committed to a certain organization. And it makes them kind of want to, talk to you like, why did you do this for so long? Or what about that experience was so intriguing to you that you did it for that long?
And the salsa would be the letter of recs from those, specific areas where you put in a lot of effort and time into. So
yeah,
I think it's a win-win, quality over quantity. Don't forget it.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then, so CASPA just wanted to pop up the image of the website. If you have never seen this before, this is a centralized application service for PAs. It's essentially what it sounds like. It's the essentially a website where you go in and put in all of this information that we just talked about. You get to type up and specify how many hours and all of those things. It's free to make an account, and this is where you essentially apply to all PA programs. I think there's 303, something like that, programs in the country, and they all use this service.
Yep.
And so the CASPA application process typically takes anywhere from 1 to 2 years. And so the timeline that we're going to be discussing, and we're going to be moving month to month and starting in January, I want you guys to kind of put this hat on of you like viewing into the future. Like, let's say you're applying to this upcoming cycle, and what January, February, March, April of 2024 would look like if you were applying, just to kind of highlight again what you need to be focusing on and give you some advice and tips as we go through it. So again, this is the timeline for the 2024-2025 application cycle. And the reason it's written here that it takes about 1 to 2 years is because the application typically opens up, and as we'll see, it opens up in April. And it usually takes between April of that year to the following year to find out if you've been admitted to a PA program that starts in the summer or fall of the following year. So again, if you were to start the application in 2024, that's typically to start PA school in the spring, summer, or fall of 2025. Okay. So I'll let you take January, Omar.
Yeah, so January, this is kind of where things start. So as Mario mentioned, the application starts April, late April. But a lot of these schools, especially for me, like most of the schools I apply to, run a rolling basis. And what that means is that they are already accepting students as they're submitting them. So there are some schools that are on a deadline, everyone turns it in and then they review all the applications. But a rolling basis means the quicker you submit it, the quicker they get to see your application and the quicker those seats are filled, right? So you might as well get ahead of the game, right? So on January, confirm you're on the track. So double check that you'll be done with your coursework on time. So what this means is that, some students will be still taking classes or the prerequisites for those classes. So for example, some students might just be starting anatomy and physio, but they want to apply in April, but then again, they won't be done with that course until, May or June. So this is where you check to see if those schools, accept your application when a certain class is in process. Some do, and some don't. During this time, you still want to be getting hours. And obviously, starting the application and being in school, it takes time away from that as well. You probably want to focus on, the application, which takes a lot of time and energy. But the reason why we say that is because you still are able to input those hours up until you submit your application, right? So during that time, if you're getting more hours, it's more hours that go on your application. And then also, so start to consider your letter of rec writers, right? Decide who you want and why you want them. And also sort of prioritize it in a way where they're hitting different spots on your application. So kind of like what Mario and myself did, right? We got someone from our job, and supervisors, which, even better. From there, you want a professor, right? Someone in academia that can vouch for you. And then, someone also for example, will require or highly recommend PAs or MDs. You also would typically want someone in the medical field, right? To vouch for you and to say, hey, this person, is professional, has a moral compass and, is inquisitive, right? The other ones can vary, right? Volunteering would be a very good one because now you're vouching for someone in the volunteering world is vouching for you. And the fifth one, you could really do anything you want, essentially. I will say, like we mentioned before, quality over quantity. So if you look at your application, you see there's a whole bunch of hours in volunteering, you probably want someone from volunteering to write your letter of rec. If you've been super involved in a sport, then, that's a perfect opportunity to get a letter of rec from your coach or, the people you work with. And the last one, so finalize list of PA schools and deadlines. This was tough. This was tough for me personally because I wanted to leave Los Angeles County. So I was open to California. I pretty much applied to almost all the California schools, but I was very much open to leave to the East Coast. So obviously that opens a wide array of schools, and that involved way more research on my end. But having a good list of schools and a good number of schools will help you set up or accelerate your process. And I will say when you're finalizing these PA schools or you're thinking about them, you might start off with a lot and then you start to dig into them and you start weeding some out. I would say keep a very good proportion of, realistic schools for you, a good chunk of realistic schools, and the dream schools should be like far less in number. And the reason why I say that, because you want to give yourself the best opportunity to get into PA school and not have to do it all over again, right? So if dream schools are realistic for you, by all means. But what I'm trying to say is, distribute your application to schools that will be likely to be able to accept you. And that's by doing that is by looking at their website, seeing if your metrics or GPA or statistics are pretty in line with their class average every year. Anything to add, Mario?
I would just add, because I know students are probably wondering it. I applied to, I think, like 7 or 8 schools, and then Omar, you applied to 15 programs?
15. I applied to 15. Yeah.
And so there's no perfect number. If you read on like Reddit and the forums, a lot of students try to aim for like that 8 to 9 mark. But if you want to, really get out of Los Angeles County, like Omar, you can apply to 15. And but it does.
I wouldn't recommend it. It gets expensive. It's time consuming, and chances of being burnt out are higher, I will say.
Yep. All right. So February is where you're gonna start to actually ask your letter. You're essentially the people who are gonna write your letter of recommendations. You're gonna ask them to start drafting your letter. One thing to highlight here is that you're going to want to instruct them to hold on to the draft until April, when CASPA opens up. At that time, you'll enter their email into CASPA, and then they will get a secure link from CASPA for them to submit it onto the CASPA secure portal. You do not submit your own letter of recommendation. And then one of the things you'll see when you're putting in their email on your end through CASPA, it'll actually give you the option to say, I do not want to access my letter of rec, or it has something like, I want to access it. You're going to hit, I don't want to access, because that essentially is showing CASPA, you're essentially telling CASPA and the PA programs for reviewing your application that you have not seen what's been written by these recommenders. And so that is much stronger. And you just always want to make sure that I do not want to see the LOR. And the other thing, I didn't do this. And Omar, did you take the GRE, bro? I think you're muted.
My bad. My apologies. I ended up taking it sort of last minute, didn't prepare too much for it. Was annoyed that I was going to take it because I didn't want to take it. And I didn't do so hot, so I just completely didn't add it to my application. And I really was just doing it for one school. I
for sure.
it, but I didn't.
So you weren't that invested. Got it. But we just put that in there. A lot of schools are moving away, and the data is kind of showing that these standardized tests don't really correlate or indicate that like how good of a provider you're going to be or how good of a student.
That makes sense.
And so they're kind of moving away from that, which is good. And you'll notice I put here some programs require it, most in California do not. And so that's something. The other thing on the horizon, I don't know when they're going to start rolling this out, but they have developed something called the PA CAT, which is unfortunately like the MCAT, but for PA students. And so that's just something to kind of keep in mind that some schools will probably be using. And then the CASPA is also another standardized personality test that some schools require. This one you really can't study for. This is just mainly to kind of see how you handle certain ethical situations. But CASPA does have a practice exam on their website to kind of get you acquainted with the format, because a lot of those questions are like free response, so you're typing up. So I guess if you wanted to improve on your CASPA score, I guess you could practice your words per minute, like doing like getting faster at typing. And we'll move on to the letter of rec request. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight for asking your letters of recommendation is really the best thing to do is to ask them in person first before you ask for an email, because the odds of like essentially a doctor or a PA or someone you work with that you've never really asked or talked about this subject for them agreeing to write you a letter of rec are probably slim to none or really low, versus if you can actually approach the person that you want to ask in person before you send this email with all the information, that is going to yield a much better outcome. So always do it in person before you send this email. And so I wanted to give you guys an example of the email that I sent to my microbiology professor. So when I first started my microbiology class, on the first day of class, and this is for this word of advice for all of my students who are freshmen, sophomore. I mean, if you're an undergrad, this is for you, and you're trying to figure out like, how do I, get a science letter of rec? It starts from the moment that you walk into someone's classroom. It starts by you sitting up in the front and making yourself known and staying after class and introducing yourself and saying, hey, my name is Mario. I'm a pre-PA student. I'm excited to be in your class. And I would hope that over the next 5 weeks, or 10 weeks of the semester, that you're able to get to know me with the hopes of potentially getting a letter of recommendation from you in the near future. And so what that does is that it lays out this kind of expectation for both parties, for you as a student and the professor. And that professor now is going to be keeping an eye on you throughout the semester to see how you interact with other students, and kind of you're going to be on their radar, which is something that you want. And so again, it's that, and then also going to like office hours and really making yourself known. Jubin, I know you're
the only thing I would add to is if there's a little trick you could do, and this is to flesh out what kind of letter you're going to get, is some of the campuses have internal scholarships and other stuff that you need a faculty letter recommendation. It's usually done in a form, and you could actually see that. Or some places you can't see what they wrote, but if you get the scholarship, you know that it was a good one. And so this is a really good way to test out. It's kind of like low yield, high reward type of thing. Because, and then the other part of it too is like, make sure you say, can you write me a strong letter recommendation?
Yeah, and that's what I was about to actually
and then
highlight.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Jubin. What were you saying?
No, but I think if you're going to their office hours and you're meeting them and they get to know you and they tell you, so like, what's your dreams and aspirations? Oh, I want to go to PA school. Oh, I want to go to medical school, or I want to go, whatever. Like, that's a good gauge to know that they know where you want to go. And then at some point, don't ask them immediately, but towards the end and say, hey, I really liked your class, or I really liked interacting with you. And I was wondering, would you be a reference point for me? And if you could be a strong one, and because I've had people ask me for letters, and if I can't write a strong one, I just tell them right away, like, I can't be a good reference for you. I teach EMT, and I've had some students that like they want to look for jobs, and I know most of the hiring managers, and I always tell them, like, come and ask me, because if you're someone that I don't think that don't use my name, or if you're going to use my name, I'm going to be really honest and say, yeah, Mario showed up late, was rude to his classmates, was throwing mannequins at them.
Yeah, and at that point, it's doing a disservice. It's like you don't want that letter.
Yeah, and I just tell people, like, I value my name more than anything. So if you come and ask me for it, I will be really upfront with you if it's going to be a good one or a bad one.
Yeah,
and So that's the only thing I would say about LORs.
Yeah, and so kind of like how Juven mentioned, that's really what we're doing here. So for my microbiology professor, I had already kind of laid that framework. He was aware that I wanted a letter of recommendation from him. And so when the time came a few months later, as I'm applying for PA school, and sometime in February, I sent him this email. I hope you're doing well, hanging in there with the headache of moving your classes and labs online, because this was during COVID. The reason for my email, I would like to formally request your highest recommendation to me for PA school. Keyword, highest recommendation. Because if a professor, a doctor, a PA cannot write a highest recommendation for you, you don't want that letter. You don't want that letter. And that means that you probably don't have a relationship with them that would end up with a really strong letter of recommendation. And then I give a little bit of the gist of CASPA opening up, and the deadline, which would be no later than June 1st. And that was just my own personal deadline. Like, I wanted to have my letters of rec submitted on their end by June 1st. And then I wrote, if you need additional time, assistance, or just cannot write it at this time, I completely understand and ask that you let me know as soon as possible. Within the next week, assuming you agree to write it, you will receive an email from CASPA that will forward you to a small survey and window to upload the letter directly to them. And then I just said some thank you for being such a fun and engaging professor. You help solidify my knowledge of genetics and microbiology, and for that I am grateful for. I'm excited about applying this cycle, and I would not be a competitive applicant without your instruction. After I sent this out, he replied, of course, send me all the details. And then I sent him this email. As requested, here are the key aspects that I'd like you to focus on. And so the thing that I wrote here and highlighted is what I wanted him to focus on for this letter of rec. I wrote, since our relationship was a professor-student, I would really appreciate a letter that focused on my academic excellence, ability to succeed in a rigorous science curriculum, leadership qualities, and teamwork, how I interacted with other classmates. Most PA programs are looking for students who know how to work as a team and receive constructive criticism frequently and appropriately. And so the reason I recommend students do this is because you want your letter of rec writers to highlight something about you, and you don't want that to be the same across the board. And so when you're sending this follow-up where you would attach your resume and kind of your personal statement to kind of give them an idea of what you're trying to do, this is going to allow them to kind of take that information and really write a letter of rec that, again, highlights something different, something unique from the interactions that they had with you. And yeah, let me see the next slide. And so one thing that I also want to mention, letter writers who don't know you well will speak in platitudes. And so what is a platitude? What is this term? A platitude is a remark or statement, especially one with moral content that has been used too often to be interesting or thoughtful. Glowing recommendations are better than platitudes. So what's a platitude? This is an example. Mario was one of my best students. He always had a great attitude and he works well with others. From the outside, like, oh yeah, that's a great statement, but it's not a glowing recommendation. And so this is actually an excerpt from my actual letter recommendation written by my microbiology professor, which I think is really a glowing recommendation. Mario has the exceptional talent of facilitating the participation of others and making those around him function at a higher level of enthusiasm and achievement. Busy days in the microbiology lab were often stressful. Students are required to juggle many tasks at a time, but Mario never fell behind, and as a student, in just a short time, took on a leadership role of assisting others and answering questions while I was preoccupied with other students. And so again, this is really highlighting how I performed and interacted with others around me and how I was essentially a leader in his class. And let's see the next slide. And so we'll dive into March, but before I do that, I did want to essentially provide all of the students who are here live with an actual letter of recommendation example. And so one of the other email attachments that I sent to this professor was essentially a template, kind of an example letter of recommendation. And in that email, let's go back to it. I don't think I mentioned it. Here I said, I attached the template. Feel free to use it and change how you see fit. You'll see differing opinions on this. Some people and some professionals will say like, no, you don't want to write a letter of, you don't want to write your own letter of recommendation example. But I think really the bigger thing is to provide stories of essentially where you can re-jog the memory of that doctor, of that PA, of that professor, of things that you did in their class or under their practice and that you want them to highlight. That's kind of the bigger takeaway from this. And so in the chat, before I forget, I will share the letter of rec template. And then Omar, I will let you start talking about March.
Yeah. And just a little bit on like what Mario was saying, I explicitly wrote what platitudes were and what glowing recommendations were in one of the emails that I would send my letter of rec individuals. And, for some of the people, like, for example, my PI/professor, he had written letter of recs for me before in the past. So you kind of don't want to send this to them if you already know they're getting the job done and they're pretty good at what they do. I definitely sent this to pretty much everyone else. And they actually gave me feedback and said they appreciate it. And in return, like for those individuals, they did send me the letter of rec and they showed me explicitly what they mentioned. And they told, examples and stories of how me myself interacted with them and everyone in the environment, and that does add more value because you're telling a story versus just saying Omar is great, Omar did this, Omar did that. So we would suggest send an email like this and speak about platitudes and what a personal statement can look like, and what an exceptional personal statement can look like. So moving on to March. So this is it all varies, right? But this is when you kind of start want to drafting your personal statement essay. I started mine end of February, mid-February, and that's just because I was anxious that I just wanted to get the personal statement up and running. And the reason why I say that too was because I did have some friends and some people that I did want to send that personal statement drafts to, but people are busy, people have lives, and the turnover rate, I have heard, and it was the reality, it's pretty slow sometimes, right? Some people can be full-time workers, some people are professors, and if you want to send them their letter of recs, it can take time to get them back. So March overall is a pretty good time frame to start on that. And honestly, it worked out perfectly. I think I'm not sure how many drafts Mario had, but I think I ended up having about 16 total drafts. Is in the same ballpark for you?
That seems kind of for sure more than 10. For sure more than 10.
And a lot of them were just like complete opposites from each other, which are very, very hurtful. It would hurt when someone would demolish my personal statements, but ended up doing me well. And then also in March, you want to already be checking up on your letter of rec writers. I kind of want to stress on that too, because there was many, many times where it's a long period of time, right? From like January to like whenever you submit your application, a lot of things can happen in your life and in their lives, right? Some people could be going through hardships. Some people can be going through financial problems. Some people can be the busiest times in their life, have the busiest times in their lives. So you constantly want to be checking up on them in a very respectful way. And some of the times you can, one way to check up on them is just like talk to them, right? Just generally talk to them. If you're talking to them, they're going to be reminded like, oh, I got to write this person letter of recommendation. Take them out to eat, ask them about their day. That can help them like keep you in mind, definitely. But yes, keep checking up on your letter of rec writers.
Yeah, I would.
Oh,
go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, last thing. Sorry. So let's say you have 4 individuals, 3, 4, 5. You always want to have backup individuals, just because, as I was mentioning, you never know what can be going on in someone's life, right? Someone can like drop off or drop out of the possibility of writing your letter of rec, especially if they want to write you a pretty good one, or maybe they just disappear, and you kind of want to have at least more than 3 if possible, because what if that third individual just went MIA, right? So very important to have backups. Go ahead, Juven.
Yeah, I would just say that I could just tell you that this is for people like some of your professors. English may not be their first language, so it's really hard for them something to do. So give them as much time as possible. I just tell you that I tell people, give me at least 3 months. Like if you want a good letter, and the reason why is that you don't want you don't want it to be a rush job. If you say, oh, I have a week, and you turn this thing, you're gonna get a week's worth of
Yep.
work. The other part of it too, when you're writing a letter of recommendation, if you're writing it yourself scratch, and most professors that have done it a lot, they have templates. But if you're like writing it from scratch and want to do a good effort, you don't do it in one sitting. You go in and you write it, and you go back and you think a little bit about the person and the relationship, and you go back and you change it. So give them as much time as you can. I know like somebody asked me for like a 2-week turnaround for a letter, and I told them like I would do it because I really like you, but it's not going to be a perfect job just because I have other things going on in my life, and I just don't have time to put in a good work. And so and it's just and it's also about respect as well. Like you know that you're going to apply to PA school, medical school, um, you know, you know, so you've known this for a long time and you've kind of put it off till the last minute to do it. And so like it's just having respect for people. Like it's a hard thing, but it's, trust me, like taking other people's feelings and emotions and everything goes a long way. What
Yeah,
is it
and I'll
called?
add
Being
that.
empathetic.
Yeah, I was like, what's that word?
What is that? What is that?
What is it? No. And that's really what we're essentially highlighting here is as we saw, we mentioned you want to start asking them in February. And so February, March, April, I gave most of my little rec writers the deadline of June 1st for them to submit. And so that was February, March, April, June, almost, yeah, like essentially
I gave
3
them,
months.
for some reason, for me, it was like May 25th. That was the deadline.
May
Like
25th,
I have
that
to
was
have
your
them on May
date.
20th.
Yeah. And again, this is not a hard deadline. This is different for every student.
No,
But we
it's
will
not.
keep
And
chugging
I
along.
definitely got them after.
Yeah.
Definitely got those
And
letter
so-
letter of recognition later than I thought, guys. So that's something to keep in mind.
Definitely. So now we're going to dive into just our little snippet on writing a killer personal statement. Omar, I'll let you highlight this slide.
Yeah. So I'll like just read this out for now. So we highly recommend keeping journals about all your medical experiences, both shadowing and working. Writing things down not only to help you process what you're learning, it provides you with an invaluable resource to return to when you need to write the application essay. So, for example, for me, at some point, I ended up just opening up my notes app, and I would write, little bullet points of something I remembered or something that just happened to me that ended up being meaningful, and I would reference that, right? And so I want to talk about the do's. So the do's: do demonstrate your knowledge of the PA profession. Your essay should make it clear what you are pursuing in medicine, or why you are pursuing medicine, and why you have chosen to become a PA specifically. So PA specifically, and we can dissect that later. But you definitely want to know the scope of practice of a PA and why it differs from, nurse practitioners, medical doctors, even teachers. Do show, don't tell. Instead of listing adjectives like compassionate, flexible, or determined, tell brief anecdotes that show how you embody these qualities. Everyone applying to PA school says they are passionate about the profession and care about people. Let the admissions committee see evidence of that in your life. And for example, you can care for people as a professor, you can care for people as a brother. Why specifically as a PA, right? Do make every word count. Not only do you need to be under 5,000 characters, you don't want to distract or bore your reader by excluding or including extraneous details, long-winded explanations, and redundancies. Avoid long paragraphs, but be sure to have strong transitions when you break them up. Go through the essay and ask yourself critically, does this word, sentence, fragment make a strong contribution to my paragraph and overall essay? Do I really need it? And that ends up becoming an art, because there are many, many things that you want to add and you do not know how to rephrase in a more concise and effective way. And that takes time. That takes multiple drafts, to be honest. But it's very much possible. Next one, so 5. Do consider incorporating a theme. A theme brings a whole essay together and makes a flow. And if you choose the right theme, it also makes it easier to write when you're relating everything back to a central point. The theme should not be medicine or why I want to be a PA. These are already the core concepts of the essay. Make it creative, applicable, and personal. If it feels like you're trying too hard to make a theme fit, try another one. I'll give you an example of mine. Mine had to do with baseball and my family. And I would say at least choose a big theme, but I use my family and baseball and then my academics or research to tell them about myself. And in telling them about myself, I show characteristics and characteristics that would make myself not necessarily a good PA, but a good PA student and an aspiring PA. And for example, like I think like draft number 12, I didn't feel so hot about my application process. Then one of my friends, is why it's important to have other friends from different fields review your application or your personal statement. He told me, he's like, hey, weren't you like, or aren't you super huge on baseball? Why don't you make it about baseball? And I was like, I don't know, that sounds weird. And literally, when I got off the phone with him, I wrote the entire my first draft for that personal statement in like 30 minutes. And it just became so easy, it flowed because it's something I was passionate about. So yes. And then last one, do make it unforgettable. Start with a hook that will immediately interest your reader. This could be a unique quote, for example, like Mara used song lyrics, or a story, really anything that will draw your audience into your world and make them wonder what the rest of your essay will say. Don't choose something arbitrary just so you have a story. Write about something meaningful to you. It doesn't have to be about medicine, as long as you show how it contributed to your decision to be a PA and or how it relates to your theme. It's okay if you don't come up with your hook right away. Just start writing and it will come to you. Very true. You just need to just type whatever comes to your mind. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to get your ideas on there. And if it might even help to create just a little bullet point outline, but just type away. Honestly, the less you think, the better it will turn out to be. Trust me on that. Do you have anything to add with all those dudes? Just start writing. Just start writing.
Yeah, that's it. Is really like if you start early, you kind of have a little bit of less of this time crunch pressure. I mean, you're still gonna feel the pressure, but really just go to a coffee shop, your favorite coffee shop or your favorite nook or favorite area, get your favorite drink, and just start typing stories of your first experiences in medicine, of maybe you going to an appointment with your mom or dad. If you have a story of you translating as a kid, get all of those types of stories on paper. And then any impactful volunteer experiences. And that way you're able to kind of step back and kind of just see what your life has consisted of and the memories that have shaped your why of YPA. And then from there, you can use those and flesh those stories out and then create more of this storytelling kind of detail. That being said, Omar discussed the do. So I'm going to dive into some of the don'ts and mistakes that you should avoid. So the don'ts. So don't say why you don't want to be a different kind of healthcare provider. Write about how you want to be a PA. And I'll repeat this, okay? So your personal statement should not open with you saying, oh, I was pre-med, I thought about becoming a doctor, and then that didn't work out. And so, my backup is PA, and so here we are now. You do not want to write that. And that's the prompt is not asking that. The prompt is not asking, oh, why don't you want to be a PA, or no, why don't you want to be a doctor or a nurse? It's exclusively asking why PA. And so this is a great place to demonstrate your knowledge of our unique profession, and be careful not to cast any healthcare workers in a negative light. Number 2, don't write that you've chosen to become a PA. That's a typo right there. Don't write that you've chosen to become, this profession because of a better lifestyle or shorter, easier schooling. Even if this is part of your reason, it is not only somewhat misinformed, it gives the impression that you believe PA school is easy, or that you won't have to work as hard. Yes, PA school encompasses, and so yes, PA school encompasses fewer months than some other graduate level healthcare programs, but it is extremely challenging. PAs often have a good work-life balance, but not necessarily, especially in certain specialties like cardiothoracic surgery. The PA that I worked with during my clinical rotation, she sometimes will work 12, 13, 14, 15-hour shifts and was on call overnight. So it really depends on the specialty. Number 3, don't be vague. So don't leave anything for the admissions committee to assume. Use lots of examples, stories, personal experiences, and lessons you've learned. If you use any abbreviations, and there's going to be lots of abbreviations in the healthcare world, write them out the first time and include the abbreviation in parentheses any other time that you mention it. Number 4, don't use informal language or contractions. So absolutely let your personality and writing style shine through, but your essay needs to be polished and inspire confidence and strong communication skills. Avoid cliches like the plague. This is not the time for you to like show your knowledge of medical terminology and for you to be, spitting out the atrial fibrillation and cardiopulmonary resuscitation. See, if it's necessary to get your point across, some technical talk is okay, but use it, keep it to a minimum to get the point across. And then the last one, don't make this a resume with more words. The admissions committee has seen your application. They know your GPA and healthcare experiences. If you have a low GPA or poor grades that you want to address, that is fine. But your essay is the place for you to talk about what sets you apart. How have your healthcare experiences strengthened your desire to go into medicine? How have your patient encounters impacted or changed you as a person? How have you grown or been stretched as you've pursued this goal of getting into PA school? How have you overcome significant challenges in your life? Try to be succinct and don't let your reader get bogged down by unnecessary details. And the other thing, or the final thing that we'll add about the personal statement writing, is even more important than a good hook at the beginning is a solid conclusion. So make sure you bring it back to your introduction, summarize or paraphrase the points that you've made throughout your essay, and finish with a memorable one-liner that really sells your desire to be a PA. And don't be afraid to spend a lot of time on this last paragraph, especially the last sentence. And then one last thing about this, if you find yourself kind of getting frustrated or hitting a wall or writer's block, take a break and come back in a few hours, or better in a couple of days when your mind is fresh. So it's okay to walk away, because again, this is going to be a process and you're not going to get through 10, 15 drafts in 1 week. Okay, so that is all that we have for our personal statements, and I know we're approaching 7, so we'll kind of fly through the last few slides. So April is when CASPA opens up. Typically, the date for that will be April 27th, and at least that's what it was for this past year. And I think again, this upcoming cycle will be opening up on April 27th. Each school has a different application and deadline date. So what that means is that you essentially, every program that you're looking at applying to, you need to do your research to see like, oh, do I have to submit that application by November 1st, December 1st, January 1st? This is just my own kind of opinion, to aim to submit by the end of May or early June if possible, but don't sweat it if you end up submitting later. A complete application with no mistakes is better than a rushed application submitted early. And then you're also, during April, are going to want to submit all transcripts to CASPA. So make sure your grades for that spring quarter semester are finalized and posted on your unofficial transcripts before you send the request. And official transcripts must be requested by you, the student, and from your registrar's office. The school then will send it to CASPA directly, either through the mail or electronically. And some schools, like at least my college at UCLA, they used parchment.com, which is essentially a website where you pay a fee and then they send it over to CASPA. And really, if you have more questions about transcripts, CASPA has an FAQ page, so you can just Google CASPA FAQ. And then from May to June, like I just mentioned, you're going to want to submit CASPA. And so you're going to want to double check for spelling or grammatical errors, double check that your errors are correct, double check which programs, the program deadlines, and double check if programs participate in rolling admissions, which is one of the things Omar had said. Not all schools do, but the ones that do participate in rolling admissions, what that means is that as soon as their application cycle opens up, the school starts reviewing the applications and they start making their list of the interview invites that they're going to send out from the moment the application opens. So technically, if you submit your application earlier, you have a higher probability of potentially getting an interview because they're seeing your application initially versus someone who waits later. But I think a lot of programs in California, because those are the only ones that I apply to, most schools out here in the West Coast don't participate in rolling admissions. And so what that means is that they wait till their deadline date and then they review all applications submitted. And then for some students, if you decide to if you took the GRE or CASPA, you could retake it around this time. And then another thing to highlight, CASPA application status. So after you finish CASPA, it's essentially gonna go through 4 phases. And this is something that I wasn't aware of when I was applying, but essentially from the moment you submit The final point in which your application is completely done is the verified stage. In between that, let's say you're a student who just submits. All your sections are complete. After you hit submit, you cannot change your entries. It goes into the received or awaiting material stage. And so in this stage, they're either confirming within 48 hours that they've received all of your materials, or it'll say awaiting materials. And this is if CASPA is waiting for either transcripts or at least, I believe it's 2 letters of recommendations to arrive, Omar. I think that's there's a minimum letter of recs, or 3.
I think it's for that specific spot. I'm not sure, but 3 is the minimum overall.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah, I think so. And so essentially your application will be placed in this awaiting material status until they get those minimum requirements. Once all of those materials are submitted, it enters into the completed/verifying stage. And so you'll only enter this stage once all materials, payment, and 2 LORs, there it is, 2 LORs are received by CASPA. The verification process can take around 2 to 3 weeks at the peak time when the CASPA organization is most slammed, which is around like June, July, August. But my experience is that it took about 5 days. Omar, what was your turnaround time for becoming verified?
I think like 5 to 7 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just something to keep in mind. And then verified is the final stage. Once you reach this point, your application will be considered verified, and you'll be able to access your official CASPA GPA, which will be available on your application. And the reason I mention this is because on the CASPA FAQ page, or the CASPA Applicant Help Center, again, you want to make sure if you ever have any questions about the PA school application, before you ask really anyone, go to the FAQ page, because they typically have the answers to most questions. But they have a document here with program deadlines for all programs around the country. And one of the things that they have is essentially they specify if a school has a green, orange, or blue deadline. And that green deadline corresponds to the verified stage. The orange deadline corresponds to being in the completed or verifying stage. And then the blue deadline applies to this stage here. And the reason that matters is because if a program has a green deadline and you're still in a stage where you haven't been verified yet, you essentially will not be able to apply to that program. You would miss their deadline. And so that's something to watch out for. Again, I won't spend too much time on this because of time, but really, we both recommend visit the CASPA FAQ page. You can just Google this phrase and you'll be able to access this information and read exactly how CASPA defines this stuff. So from June to August, this is the point where you would receive and complete supplementals. So each school may have additional supplemental applications or essay questions that they might ask you to complete. And these are typically sent before interviews. And then some PA programs will actually have them within CASPA before you submit. When you select let's say you're applying to UC Davis or Stanford, you'll submit all of the general information for your application, and there will be a section there will be a section specific to UC Davis or to Stanford to insert your interested program, where they will let you write a supplemental essay. And so again, it's something to watch out for. But these are typically sent before interviews. And then during this time as well, you may start receiving interview invites. And so during this time, you want to start practicing your interview skills. You want to start reaching out to local PA programs or pre-PA clubs that might offer mock interview sessions. If you're located in the West Coast, I know Marshall B. Ketchum does mock interviews, and the USC's primary care PA program, they have a pre-PA club that also does mock interviews. And also mymentor.org does an annual virtual free mock PA interview. So that's something to watch out for and look for. And then September to March of the following year, the main advice we have for this is, one, to be patient. This process is long. It is easy to get discouraged. Continue to work hard on improving yourself as an applicant. and try your best to write great supplemental essays. And I see this often. I have like students who work with me who write a killer personal statement, and then we're getting towards their like 8th or 9th supplemental, and I can see that they're losing steam. I can see that they're just like, I just want to submit it. But my biggest recommendation is try not to do that. Try to continue again running this marathon, because that's essentially what it is. The other thing is that one of the warnings that we also wanted to give you guys is don't spend too much time on pre-PA forums or Reddit. So there's this forum called the physicianassistantforum.com, which I think Omar and I think every pre-PA student who's ever applied, it's a great tool to get an idea of when each program sends invites and the experiences students have had in the past. And then a lot of students on here will also share their stats when they get admitted. But beware that this can also be a source of anxiety and lead to feelings of inadequacy or comparison. And so take, what you're seeing on these websites with a grain of salt, because at the end of the day, you don't know if, these are trolls online, and try not to compare yourself. There's going to be applicants out there with 3.9 GPAs and 50,000 hours and 5 million volunteer hours. And, they have max hours for everything. Try not to compare yourself, because you have unique attributes, you have unique experiences in your life that no one else has, and those are valuable things that we need in healthcare. And then let's see what else we got. And so after you've done all this, hopefully you will get accepted. And if you're in one of the 44 students who is still on this Zoom call, then it sounds like you will probably have all of your ducks in a row and will hopefully land an acceptance. The other thing or possibility is to be waitlisted, which is okay, or to be rejected, and that's okay too. I always tell my mentees it's not a matter of if, but when you get into PA school. And I'll say it again, it's not a matter of if, but when you get into PA school. And so try to not lose sight of your goal, which is to be that provider that your community deserves, and keep at it. And I'm not saying that any of you guys will be in this boat, but I actually had a close buddy of mine, a classmate at UC Davis, who applied 7 times, 7 cycles. And so the takeaway is the takeaway in mentioning that is not to say it's really hard to get into PA school, but to say, keep working at this, showing up and trying every day to move the needle a little bit closer to your goal, and you will get there. And then just Omar and I wanted to mention briefly some paid subscription services, because we often get questions about this. And so the first one that I will mention is the CASPA transcript entry service. So CASPA, in their application, they actually offer an option where you can pay $60 and they will input your transcripts, your grades into CASPA. I actually didn't pay for this, but I had a close buddy of mine who did. And after paying for it, he actually found errors in the grades that were inputted. And so my advice for you guys is that I do not recommend this service. No one's going to be more diligent and more complete than you in terms of it putting in your grades into the application. It does take a day or two, because it's kind of a lot of work to put biology 101, I got a B, and chemistry 104, I got an A. And doing that over and over again for all of the classes we've ever taken takes forever. But again, just go to a coffee shop, get some coffee, and chip at it, and try to be as thorough as you can. Omar, I'll let you take these 2 away, since you had your experiences with them.
Yeah. And a little bit on the CASPA transcript entry. So, when you're submitting your grades, double check it, triple check it, because you don't want to submit an error and you have to go back and fix that. Yes. So I actually paid for a platform service early on, and I thought I was okay, I did well. And then one of my friends told me about the Humorous PA at the time, and they had this bundle where they could review over everything, your entire application plus 2 interviews, and then they look at 3 of your supplementals. So I was like, okay, whatever, I'll do it. And they completely destroyed my other personal statement from personal statement that was reviewed by a different platform. So and honestly, it was for the better. And I think for the most part, I really enjoyed the humorous PA. At the time, it was led by two PAs, and I believe one of them actually was in an admissions committee for like a school in New York as well. So they knew what they were doing. They have experience. So I was sold. And in doing so, it took time for them to review my application, but honestly, they provided amazing and great feedback throughout my entire application. Plus, they reviewed my personal statement twice, I believe, and 3 of my top supplementals. And they reviewed the supplementals twice or once, and they reviewed my personal statement twice. Yes. So I know it's far more expensive than what it was back then, but just to add, I was always on the line if I should pay for a service. And then eventually I snapped out of it and said, look, I'm going to put myself in the best possible situation I can for this cycle. Cause you want to apply, the least amount of times because to CASPA, because it takes time, it takes effort, and it's draining. Right. So I said, I'm going to go all in. I'm gonna save money. I went all in with this. And as the second note, people have been utilizing services since the day they were born, essentially. And I knew I was already disadvantaged when it came to that. And on top of that, I knew, I wasn't the best at English. English wasn't my first language either. So I told myself, I'm going to try and level the field at least a little bit. So I'm going to pay for the service. And it worked out. And I really enjoyed the humorous PA. So for my PA box, I actually had my PA box. And I think at the time I got it during Black Friday, so 25% off or something like that. So I snapped on it, I did it, and it really helped me set up a framework and of what schools I want to apply to and why, because it had all these schools laid out, 250 maybe at the time, and it broke everything down: the statistics, the location, what are the prerequisites, what's the cost, also what else? The cost, the prerequisites, are shadowing recommended? What is the average shadowing hours? All that good stuff. And since I wanted to go to the East Coast, I was open to going to the East Coast as well. It really helped me a lot because I didn't know so much about schools in the East Coast. So it really helped me solidify and weed out a lot of schools based on my metrics and their metrics. Is it entirely necessary? I don't think it's entirely necessary if you're only applying to very few schools and there's schools you're familiar with, and there's schools, let's say they're in California, you're in California. If you're hoping to apply a little bit more or don't know much about PA schools, I think it's a perfect opportunity to hop on the PA box. And if you guys end up pursuing that, feel free to ask me questions about my PA box and the humorous PA. Yes.
Yeah, and one thing the caveat that I will highlight for all of these is that you don't need paid subscriptions or services. You can totally, there's a bunch of free resources like the CASPA FAQ page, like Reddit, like the physician assistant forum for you to essentially do your own research. But really what you're getting from these services is convenience and experience from the people who have been working. So the humorous PA, I know you had mentioned, Omar, that you had a pretty good experience with them. And the other one that I will highlight that I used when I was applying was the PA Life, and I use these to actually do a mock interview. And because I was practicing with family, with friends, and with really anyone who would listen. But I also knew that I needed to get tangible feedback from a third party and someone who actually had interviewed hundreds and thousands of other people. And so the PALife.com, you can Google this one as well. And I think they offer a really strong mock interview service. And I've had a lot of mentees go down that route with them and have had a great experience. And then kind of like how Omar mentioned with my PA box, if you're applying to 7 schools or 8 schools, I personally don't think it's necessary. Ultimately, you need to do your research, just like how Jubin always mentions, and no one's going to do that research better than you. And then Omar just dropped his affiliate link with my Paybox, which is Omar15 for 15% off. And then the last one is the Mexican PA Consulta. And so this is kind of a, I guess, shameless plug for myself. And recently, given that I am no longer a student and I'm at home waiting for my medical licenses to get my first real job as a medical provider, I have started offering these affordable, essentially one-on-one sessions where you can essentially meet with me, and prices for this start at $40 because, again, this is really the reason I'm charging is because I have bills to pay and a tank of gas to fill up. But this is really for the student that wants that one-on-one with me. And so the link for that is calendly.com/the Mexican PA/consulta. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions. And then the last thing that I will highlight is just mistakes and pitfalls to avoid for the PA school application. One, transcripts. Like I previously mentioned, you're required to request all transcripts be sent to CASPA, usually through a third-party site or by mail. And so this is not something that you can, or at least with some students I know, they hadn't realized that they needed to request this. And so make sure you're doing this for every undergraduate school that you've ever been to. And so if you went to a community college, to a four-year university, and then took some courses online with, another online college, all of those transcripts need to be sent to CASPA. Letters of recommendation, confirm that your writers have submitted on their end, and also confirm on CASPA's end that they've received the letter of rec. And then when you're submitting your CASPA application, all sections of CASPA must be filled out prior to being able to proceed with payment. So I've had some students who are like, where's the payment button so I can submit to, my school? If you're not going to see that if there's a section that's incomplete. Verification time, make sure you submit CASPA at least 3 to 4 weeks before your first program deadline. And so the thing I'll say about this is when I was applying to UC Davis at that time, the program deadline was like mid-July. I submitted my application to be verified, I think, a week beforehand. And so if CASPA would have taken more than a week to verify my application, I would have missed the deadline for UC Davis. And who knows, I wouldn't have gotten into that program. So yeah, make sure you're giving yourself enough time for CASPA to verify your application. And then program deadlines, make sure you're double checking deadlines. Sometimes they change from one year to the next. So I know the year I applied, the deadline for UC Davis was in mid-July, and then they pushed it to I think August 1st or November 1st. So that's something to look for. And then the last thing is CASPA updates. After you submit your CASPA application, you are not able, after you submit your CASPA application, you are not able to edit any of the information that's been submitted already. What you can do, though, is go in and make an update and add to the application. But every time you do that and you hit save, you will not be able to change that new update, or it's gonna stay in there forever and become a permanent part of the rest of the application. And so the reason I mention this is because when I was sending in an update about my hours working as an ER tech, I put in the name of the job. So I was working as an ER technician at Loma Linda. I put in the hours that I worked. And then in the description, I was getting hungry. So I was like, I'm just going to put a little placeholder. I think I hit the Z button 15 times and hit save. And then I went to go eat. I came back and I was trying to edit that entry and I couldn't. It was saved permanently onto my CASPA file. And so, yeah, that was a mistake and a headache that I was just like, oh my gosh, I just ruined my entire PA school application. I'm never going to get in. We'll try again next year. That's not true. You can make mistakes. My application had, a mistake like that. I will say if that ends up happening, but hopefully will not happen to any of you because we just told you not to, or to be aware of that. But if it does, what I did in that case is I essentially did another entry. I put 0 hours because I didn't want to make it appear as if I was double dipping on the hours that I had done. And then I wrote in lieu of ZZZZ, the entry I had previously made. And then I actually described what I did. I worked as a patient care assistant and telemetry technician, all the things that I did as an ER technician. And so, yeah, just some pitfalls and mistakes to watch out for, and hopefully you will avoid as you approach your PA school application. And I believe that is the final slide. So we have I think like another 10 minutes. This time we wanted to make sure we got you guys out on time so you can enjoy the rest of your Sunday. But I think we have some time for questions. So we will move on to that.
All right, I can start us off. Do you recommend sticking to one job or EMT or multiple jobs like EMT for a year, MA for another year to gain patient care experience?
Okay. I'll speak on this one. And I know Mario has a similar experience. So for me specifically, I did just EMT. And in one setting essentially. I think Mario, was working in the ER as well. I considered doing that. I wanted to work in the ER, but given the circumstances, whatever, it became difficult to move, and especially when I had a job I already enjoyed that I had priority with choosing my schedule and all that. So all that played a role in me staying. But I told myself if I was going to stay, I was going to climb up the ladder. So to make myself a better candidate and to really have a more meaningful experience in the company that I was going to stay at for a longer time, I decided to become a what is it called? EMT. I started training new EMTs.
FTO, field training officer.
FTO. There you go. Field training officer. Damn, it's been a while. So I decided to do that, and I did that for a while, and that gave me, a far better understanding of the EMT world. Plus, it tested myself. Plus, it tested my teaching skills. Taught me how to acclimate to different different EMTs and their different learning styles. So it helped me a lot. And I will say again, quality over quantity. If you really want to leave your job, I would say do it. If you really want to get a better experience and you have this better opportunity, then go for it. It's not necessary if you're already enjoying what you're doing. And especially if you'll be there longer and have more credibility, with the specific company, you likely will have a stronger letter of rec. Mario, he did the ER, ambulance. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I worked for about like a year and a half on the ambulance, and then I got hired on as an EMT at a casino. Did that for a month, and then COVID hit. The casino shut down, and then I was there for about a week, and then got laid off. I got the notice I was laid off. I was like, oh, all right, cool. And then I was unemployed for about a month, but still had some connections to the local emergency department. And I asked my buddy, I was like, hey, you guys, need people? And he was like, yeah, we do. And then I was able to land an interview, and then spent about a year, especially all of COVID, working in the emergency department. And so it was really, really a great experience. I'm a lot different than working in the ambulance. But I think it really, again, having different experiences like that and being exposed to a variety of different patient care experiences, I think is something valuable, especially if you can do, for instance, one role for like a year and get 1,000, 2,000 hours in one area, and then another 1,000 or 2,000 hours in another. And that is going to be stronger than, let's say, a student who has just stayed in one role for 2-3 years. Yeah.
The only thing that I would add to that is that, like, if you're working in one place and you're happy and it's your personality, like I've worked in the ER for a long time, and I'll tell you this right now, I could never go work in an office or even like a skilled nursing facility or even like on an amp. I just couldn't do it. It's just not my personality, and I'll probably get bored. So like like the job that you do, it's something you got to enjoy. And like, let's say, hey, you go work as an EMT and you hate it. Yeah, go work somewhere else and find something that you enjoy. But this is so much about you. They don't really care. They don't really care what your experience is because, hey, they need PAs in the ER, they need PAs in clinic, they need PAs. And so like, don't get so caught up in what they're looking for, but mostly about what you enjoy when you excel at. Because if you have a job that you hate, like, you're not going to do well. And so, and I can tell you this right now, most schools don't really have a care about like what you do. And somebody posted in there, how do you get an ER job? I don't know about you, but like when we hire where I work at, and we interview people, you need to have some sort of experience, and most EMTs have ambulance experience. like it's very rare that somebody would get hired without any kind of clinical experience. And the reason why is even in our interviews, like if you get to our interviews, a couple of questions we ask that you kind of need to have some clinical experience, because you have some autonomy. Even though you're working under physicians and nurses, you still do a lot of things that require you to think and have some sort of clinical knowledge. So yeah, and so basically I would say if you get and somebody asked about how you get hired as an EMT, pretty much like if you're in an EMT program at a community college or almost all places, they will get ambulance companies that'll come and recruit you towards like the end of the class. They'll bring in their shiny new ambulance and give out pens and stuff, and then they will recruit you. And then again, I put in there also like you could use your instructor as a reference if you're someone that showed up on time and worked well with others and all that good stuff. So but yeah, just kind of trust the process. Like you don't need to like getting an EMT job now, and certainly with shortages, it's pretty easy to get a job. And then the other part of it too in California, starting 2024, 2025, the minimum payment for any kind of healthcare job is going to be $25 an hour. So there you go. Mario's like, damn it, I wish I.
Dude, when I was at EMT, I remember on the ambulance, I was making $13.50.
50, yep.
$13.50 an hour. That was back in, what was it, like 2018? Oh my gosh.
I know.
Back in
back in
yeah.
No,
I had buddies who were like working at In-N-Out, and I was like, dang, you guys are balling.
Yeah.
Dude, they're flipping burgers. I'm doing chest compressions and getting $13.50.
Yeah, I gotta take grandma the sniff for $13 an hour. Yeah, no, it sucks. I mean, it's gonna go.
And
it's going up.
The way I view that is though it's a season of life. Like these companies, unfortunately, there's no other way to put it. Like they are taking advantage of like cheap labor. But really it's a stepping stone. Like you working in these roles that don't pay a lot as like a CNA and the EMT and MA, it's a stepping stone, and you're not going to be there forever. You're going to become a PA. And so just view it almost like, I guess, like volunteer
Putting your
work.
time. Putting your time.
You're doing your time. Yep.
I can tell you, CNAs at my hospital make like $30 an hour. I'm like, hey, maybe maybe Mario, you should come work here.
We're not doing it for the money, Juven. Come on, you know this.
Hey, I always tell. Go ahead. Sorry.
All right, no, yeah, we'll continue chugging along so we can answer some of these questions, and then I'm gonna actually start chipping away at some of the ones that are in the chat. I will do my best to kind of type some of those answers.
All right. Our next question we have is, would PA programs frown on shadowing MDs or NPs instead of PAs? I work with the only PA at the clinic, and she can't really shadow. So she was wondering if she can potentially shadow other NPs or MDs in the clinic instead.
I can briefly answer this one. You totally can. I had about, I think, 40 or 50 hours shadowing an MD, and like I think one shift, like a 10-hour shift shadowing a PA. And so really what they want to see is that you're exposing yourself to essentially the healthcare professions. And so whether you only end up being able to get a physician or an NP to shadow, that is okay, because there's some overlap in the things that we do. And really you're going to be exposed and be able to witness what it is to care for people and do the patient interview and get a history and things like that. And so I guess that the short answer for that is it's totally fine. If that's what you can get, do it. And of course, if you're trying to become a PA, it's preferred for you to shadow a physician assistant, but that's not always possible. And so you get what you can get.
All right. Our next question is, how can I calculate my final GPA when I take classes outside my uni?
So this is kind of difficult, but there is some GPA calculators available online that you can just Google and put in all of your units. Jubin, did you have one that you recommend?
Yeah, I actually have a spreadsheet somewhere.
Oh, sweet. Okay. So we can
I could put it in the chat. Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, I know like you can essentially search up PA school GPA calculator,
Calculator.
and and you'll be able to. There's some that are like free, and you can just put in all of your grades to get an idea. All right, and then Jubin just shared that with us, the AMCAS GPA calculator. Yep. All right.
Yeah, and there's some that are also like that you can do online. And if some people find this spreadsheet kind of hard, the Excel form, but there's also some online that you could do. But some of them, oops, I send it directly to you instead of everyone. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'll send it again to everyone. But yeah, definitely you could use this one. It's free. It's your copy. But some of them are online as well, but you may not be able to save it. So this one you could carry it with you everywhere you go.
Yeah, and then there's one on the PA platform that I'll be dropping in the chat as well. They have like a CASPA kind of specific GPA calculator. So I'll share that. I'll share that now. Where's the chat? All right, next question.
All right. Our next question is: could volunteering at a birthing center without any certificate count towards or is it considered patient care experience?
So one of the things to differentiate is that there's healthcare experiences and patient care experiences. And typically, and Jubin's mentioned this before, is that the roles where you're actually giving direct hands-on patient care, where you're contributing to the medical decision-making or the medical management of a patient, and those are roles that typically require some form of certification, whether it's a CPR BLS certification, an EMT certification, a CNA license, a phlebotomy certification, or even scribes are sometimes certified. I think the only typically role where we see people get patient care experience without a license is like a private practice clinic where you're hired on as a back office medical assistant, where you're the one taking the vitals, you're the one screening the patient or administering vaccines. Volunteering at a birthing center, I think the answer for this question would depend really on what your role is. If it's like handing like blankets and like restocking things
Or
for the
rooming
birthing
patients,
center,
yeah.
or rooming patients, I would say that probably wouldn't count as a patient care experience. That's probably more healthcare. But if you're someone who's taking vitals, if you're someone who's drawing medication and like helping the nurses to prep the patient, like those are things where you're directly caring for and are involved directly hands-on with the patient. And so I would say it would depend specifically what you're doing. And then there's quite a bit of programs that will actually specify on their website. So it's important that you do your own research, that the patient care experience needs to be paid. And so they won't accept healthcare experiences or experiences that are volunteer work. And so that's also something to watch out for.
The other thing is that I would just say too is that if you are doing like a back office MA in California, if you work in there and you have, I think, 100 hours, you could get the doctor to sign you off on it and then get certified, and you just have to take a test. And there's questionnaires on there. You can do that and just look up the California Medical Board Assistant Board or whatever. I'll look it up and I'll put it in the chat. So you get certified. And the reason why you have to be certified and to be paid is that for you to touch somebody, you have to be certified. Like there's no ifs and buts, unless a physician is willing to put their license on the line to do that and is willing to vouch for you. And so and I could tell you this one kind of is like a personal one for me. Like if you all can't do any kind of medical care in the US, don't go to some foreign country and say, oh, I put 100 hours. I went down there and took care of some, poor people and poor people with darker skin. No, that's doesn't really count. Like, and there's a lot of places that frown on that. And actually like WMC put like this big thing about it as well. And so, and we have this presentation, you could go look at it, that it's like 2 hours long. There's so many things you could do and get certified. Like you could be a certified doula. It takes like 40 hours. If you're interested in women's health, go become a certified doula. And I'll put that thing in the link too, and you can take a look at it. So yeah, I could probably talk until like tomorrow about this stuff.
All right. Our next question we have is, how did you approach the achievements and experience details of your CASPA given the limited character limit?
This takes like trial and error, to be honest. Like I think, like as we mentioned, you just need to write everything and anything you could think of, like whether it's 35 100 pages, whatever it is, have it there, and then slowly start to like cut out the things that you think aren't so necessary or aren't so meaningful. And you can highlight things based on priority and meaningfulness to your life, your application. But honestly, it just takes practice, and it takes practice, but it also takes some friends or professionals to look over your application, especially people who know you. People who know you will tell you that, for example, for me, like I would have never written my personal statement on baseball entirely if it wasn't for them. So things that may not seem obvious to you might be obvious to your friends and family and professionals. So it takes time, but just write everything out at first.
And then one of the things to add to that, I just dropped in the chat one of my YouTube videos where I essentially walk you through my entire CASPA application, and in that video you'll be able to see how I describe my achievements and experiences. So you can use that as a template and guide for your own application.
Dang, I wish I had that. This is exclusive stuff, y'all.
And then Melanie asked, any advice for undergrad students? I mean, there's as you can see, these sessions are really what we're doing here is providing you with a framework with all of the advice, the tips, the pitfalls to avoid as you're approaching the application. But really, if you're an undergraduate student, I would say the big thing is really try to focus on maintaining that GPA up above, your work, above, your extracurriculars, because like it or not, you can always get more volunteer hours later on, but your GPA is forever, and it's much harder to come back from a low GPA.
Yeah, it builds character, though, I will say.
It does build character. Yeah, but it's also expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Next question.
Right. Can you guys talk about your experience with the NHSC in terms of application tips or your experience after getting the scholarship?
I can start this one off. So my experience with this. So me and Mario go to very expensive schools, and that's not even to say how expensive PA programs are. And I don't know if you guys seen gas prices nowadays. Everything costs more. It's ridiculous. So
it's too
the
damn
way
high.
I saw it, yeah, los frijoles, too much money nowadays. So the way I saw it was I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I was probably gonna favor emergency acute care, but to me, even for you, if you don't really like primary care, I would suggest probably becoming primary care's biggest fan, especially if they pay for your entire tuition. And I know you don't really think about that, but as you get older and as you progress through your PA school program, you start to become more adult responsibilities come on. And then all of a sudden you're thinking about, it's too expensive to go out this night. And then all of a sudden you're thinking about your debt. Oh, damn, I forgot about my debt. And then you look at your debt account and it's the percent, it keeps accruing, and then your bills get more expensive. That's when it starts to hit you. That's when it started to hit me. So knowing that I don't have to worry about that as much is very honestly, it takes so much stress off my shoulders in many, many ways. Because, for example, our programs are very, very expensive. I'm already living in a very expensive place, and everything continues to get more expensive. So my experience has been wonderful. The way I see it is I'm going to work in primary care setting that involves primary care, OB, pediatrics, outpatient internal medicine, and psychiatry. So if you're interested in those, 100% do them. I would say consider them maybe if you don't want to do it just yet. But the way I see it is I'm going to be doing general medicine, which means I'm going to cover all my bases for me 3 years, for Mario 2 years. So 3 years, I'm going to be doing primary care, general medicine. The cream of the crop is going to be in my head. I'm going to have that down. And then from there, I could specialize. And on top of that, it's a win-win because a lot of these programs or departments generally like for someone to be practicing in general medicine before they advance to different specialty. An example of that would be, let's say I go into dermatology. I'm making a lot of money because that's what dermatologists do. Make a lot of money, but then I want to go into emergency medicine, right? Dermatology just doesn't necessarily translate to emergency medicine. So there is a higher chance they might take someone in primary care or a field that's closer to emergency. So that's been my experience. I love it and I recommend it. And if you guys have questions, feel free to reach out to me.
And the other thing, I don't know if Omar, you mentioned it. Usually the application opens in the spring.
Yeah, like in May?
May, March. Yeah, no, it was like I think late March because I remember I had just gotten married, and then my wife was like, "Why are you working on this?" Like we just got back from a honeymoon, and she's like, "Why are you working on this application? Like you just applied to PA school, we got accepted, and now you're doing another essay." I'm like, "Babe, this is gonna save us like $150,000." And she's like, "All right," and then plus, yeah, and it did. So we, yeah, it was worth the time and energy. That
now you're gonna upgrade her ring now or what?
Oh, not yet. We're still we still haven't even gotten hired yet as a PA. Yeah, but I think we have 3 more questions, so we'll
enjoy it
answer
because this is the
those.
last time you're gonna be working forever, man. Enjoy this time off.
It's I mean, regardless, we're gonna get to do what we want to do, which is take care of people. So it's a win-win. And the next question, do you have any advice for non-traditional students, career changers? I completed most of my prereqs in 2019 or earlier and was looking into schools without prereq expiration dates. And so really, I mean, you kind of answered your own question, is really looking for those programs that don't have that limit for expiration dates for courses. I think most schools will. I don't remember exactly what that timeline looks like, but that's something to
usually it's 5 to 7 years I've seen.
5 to 7 years, yeah. But I will say the PA profession is it's very common to have career changers, and so you are not alone. And I would advise, if you have Facebook, to search up pre-PA student group on Facebook. And I think there's also a forum as well at the physicianassistantforum.com where there's people who have kind of been in your same situation. And it's more common than you think for non-traditional students to apply and pursue the PA profession.
Yeah, the only thing that I would just say is whip out a spreadsheet and create a spreadsheet to see which of them have. I think some of them are 5 years, some of them are 7 years. But also, like if you've got all A's in those classes, try to retaking them. I don't know, but if you got C's, maybe taking them and get A's. I don't know. I think it's just going to come down to like where you want to go and where, I mean, there's PA programs are kind of all over the place. Some of them don't care, some of them do care, some of them have this. So that just depends. Like pull out the spreadsheet and, I always like to do like the list of like, and then check things off. Like, okay, this is a decision that you got to make. And like, I know one person who applied to PA school and went to this one PA school in New York because they didn't require a GRE. And they were okay with moving halfway across the country to New York. So it just all depends on,
Yeah. This seems like it's a little bit more difficult to look into. There's lots of breakdown here. I mean, it depends like how far, that person's willing to go, like across the United States or not. But it does involve some research, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I know like Yale has an online PA program where you could like do some of it online and then fly out to Connecticut, or if you could find like, so there's all like virtues of stuff. This is an interesting question about the person who's teaching. Do you want to read that one? Because I have an idea for them.
Oh, I answered that question. I pretty much told them that they can reach out to PA programs, but I imagine they're still going to require you to have that course and take it maybe at a different university, because these are typically the prereqs are hard requirements that all applicants must have, regardless of your background. It's a possibility that they may make an exception, but I think really they would kind of they're going to treat everyone similarly. If they're going to require student A and student B to have microbiology, and you're a microbiology professor, again, I think you would probably have to email them and get in touch with them, but I imagine that they would want you to take the course.
There's also this thing at most community colleges you can do, it's called credit by examination. So just talk to your department and say,
and especially some of those prereqs require the lab component. And so that's something that you kind of just, I don't think you can test out of a lab.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because I mean, and you're right. I mean, some schools may be like, oh yeah, that's great, and some schools like, no, you have to take it regardless if you're teaching it. I don't know. I would just do credit by examination and examine all the labs, even though like if you're teaching the classes, you set up your own lab. And I don't know. I mean, I think just be creative. I would just say. I mean, if you're teaching, if you're teaching those classes, like, I don't know. It's kind of I don't know. We can't hear you.
Those are all the questions.
You're muted. Mario, you're muted.
Oh, I was sorry, guys. I was saying it looks like we answered 45 questions, so I am very proud of us.
Yes.
And I think with that, I think we will call it time. And just on behalf of Omar, myself, and the Pre-Med CC team, thank you guys for joining us for another session. And then in 2 weeks, just to remind you, we're going to be having session 3. Juben, can you remind us what the focus of that one is going to be on?
Yes.
Let's see if not, I think I have the email.
I believe this is how to succeed in PA school.
No, this one is discover. No, to discover your path to PA school. Discover the path to success at PA school.
Okay, so we're going to be diving into all the details, giving you guys the scoop on how to survive and thrive in your PA program. And so
it's going to be a good one.
It is
cool.
So we look forward to